I just went live all by myself. We're having trouble with this Hangout stuff, but I thought I would go ahead and push the live now button just to make sure that everything is working. Looks like we got Scott and Joe coming back in already. Nice. That elusive live now button just disappeared and then reappeared, so now it's broadcasting live. We got it rocking. So I can
Excellent.
push the live now tweet on the tweeter to the Tweeterland. And so this is a very informal PHP roundtable. I'm Sammy K. Powers. I host this thing, and today we're just going to room 11 in Stack Overflow, which is the de facto chat room for all things PHP. A lot of PHP internals people hang out there, and it's a good place to kind of get an idea of what's going on in the PHP world. And so I just popped in. It's like, hey, PHP people in room 11, let's hang out. And so we just had Dan join us too. Welcome, Dan.
Hello, how's it going? Can you hear
Doing
me at
well.
all?
What's that?
Can you hear me at all?
Yes.
I'm not that good with technology, I'm sorry.
well, you don't have anything as an avatar. Your video's not showing up. But I can see you on Stack Overflow though.
Yeah, I probably
Yes.
actually don't have the bandwidth to do video as well as speech at the same time.
True.
We've got a
True.
slight issue with technology in this
No,
area of Bristol.
it's no worries. I'll end up just making an audio version of this anyway. But yeah, so I'm just curious to see what you guys have been. You guys were chatting about all kinds of stuff in Stack Overflow today. Scott, you were Stack Overflowing a lot about. Well, you're always tweeting about or tweeting and Stack Overflowing about security and stuff. And you had some stuff about RSA and Libsodium.
Yeah, a lot of people like to implement RSA using arithmetic operators rather than a library that does all that stuff for them. And even if they do it correctly, they end up with unpadded RSA, which is really trivially easy to crack. So if you're thinking about implementing RSA in a PHP application, please don't. PHP SecLib actually does it right, and their documentation actually nudges you towards the secure options. So I would definitely say if you do need RSA, go with PHP SecLib. Don't mess around with BC Math.
Well, so RSA, you're not saying don't use RSA. You're just saying don't run your own RSA implementation.
Um, I'm sort of saying don't use RSA too. I mean, if you have to use RSA, it's usually because you're stuck with what PHP gives you and you can't install PHP extensions. And if you use RSA correctly, you're probably okay. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe there's some attack that's going to come out next year that'll just say RSA is completely insecure, stop using it. But in lieu of that knowledge, yeah, if you're going to use it, use something that's been well studied. PHP SecLib actually does. It lets you use OAEP padding, which for as a translation, OAEP stands for optimal asymmetric encryption padding, and all you really need to know is that's the mode you want. You don't want the PKCS1 padding. You don't want no padding. You want that one.
So I mean I don't know a whole lot about RSA. The kind of very higher up knowledge I have of it is that you take two really big prime numbers and you multiply them to get together and get a really big prime number, or a semi-prime number, I guess I should say, and then that acts as your key or private key or shared key or something. There's some kind of key in there that that's being used, and then but I was seeing something recently about like how quantum computers are able to very easily figure out the semi-prime semi-prime numbers. So I don't know. Is that the reason why you shouldn't be using it?
It's not just that. I mean, yes, prime factorization attacks from quantum computers kind of blow it out of the water. If you can get a practical quantum computer that can factor a 1024-bit prime number, like it can actually do it, it'll probably do it like miles faster than a classical computer. For comparison, if you wanted to like brute force a 1024-bit RSA key, given their public key, just from factoring, it would probably take an intelligence agency about 2 to the 80 operations, millions of dollars, in order to just find one private key. With a quantum computer, that would probably, in terms of computation costs, like energy usage, would probably be orders of magnitude smaller.
Am I being naive? Or don't quantum computers only exist in research laboratories at the moment?
Um,
I think
yeah,
so. Yeah.
Google published something about D-Wave, but there's been a lot of disagreement about their findings, whether or not that's actually an asymptotic result in all these conditions they were running tests on. There is, as far as I'm aware, no practical quantum computer available, even to intelligence agencies, but everybody suspects that will change soon. So a lot of cryptographers are meeting together over the next couple of years for, it's called PQ Crypto. It's basically a post-quantum cryptography symposium. It's going on over in Europe and the US. I think it's IACR putting that on. Let me see.
While he's looking that up, I'll just say that I've got a prediction that within 15 years, the use of one-time pads will be standard place in many, many cases, rather than trying to do private public key in crypto. Just because one-time pads, we kind of have the technology in place to use them now. You could go to your bank with a little USB dongle, like one of these. This one could hold 16 gigabytes of one-time pads, which is quite a few. And that wouldn't be used to encrypt all the data, but it'd be used as a secure method of exchanging keys rather than the public-private keys stuff, which I never really understand anyway. But
yeah, I leave security to people that understand it. I think it's bizarre to worry about quantum computers now. I mean, I can't. Isn't the whole thing going to be totally different? I mean, the whole thing is going to be totally different. The problems we've got now are not going to be the same. I can't really imagine a way to worry about it.
Yeah, it's like the next generation, right? Like the next generation of security that we're going to have to worry about, because there is like a whole level, like I think Scott kind of alluded to it, that there's a whole entire encryption based off of quantum mechanics and this quantum computing idea where you can have two, like, what is it? You can have two, what do you call it? Like two atoms or something in the same place at the same time in quantum mechanics.
Superposition is the correct term, I believe.
Yeah. That's apparently that's a good thing when you come to computing. Justin looks like he's trying to come in. I don't know if he's able to hear us or we can hear him.
Perhaps it's just a cardboard cutout of Justin.
It's just his avatar. He just likes to pop in and pop out. But oh yeah, before it gets too crazy, I wanted to ask Scott, because Scott was you've been nerding out about Libsodium a bit, and it looks really cool. As I believe you're kind of you've been blogging about it and tweeting about it, and I haven't had any projects to implement it yet, but it looks like a drop-in replacement for mcrypt, right? Basically.
No, there's a little bit more to it than that. But if you use Libsodium for either public key or symmetric key encryption, you're guaranteed to get far better and actually far more efficient results than if you tried to use like RSA. So, specific example, let's say you wanted to encrypt a message what's a good example of this? Let's say you had an application, you needed to log all your data, but you didn't want like the people who run the endpoint server to actually read what the logs say. It's kind of like, this is secret data, we're passing it off to our central thing for only our engineers to look at. And if you just tried to encrypt it with a key and you had the same key in the source code, everybody would be able to decrypt what you're sending, so that wouldn't be very useful. So in this situation, you would want to use public key encryption. The specific utility in Libsodium is called crypto box seal, and what it does is it behind the scenes generates a random key pair, uses your public key to encrypt the message, and then it attaches the random generated public key and then sends that off with the actual ciphertext.
So a little different then.
Yeah. So some of the utilities Libsodium gives you are like CryptoBox, which is authenticated public key encryption. You don't have to really worry about what it does behind the scenes too much. You just give it your private key, the person you're trying to talk to's public key, and your message, and something called a nonce, which is basically a random number, a very large random number. The only requirement on a nonce is that it never repeats. You can actually generate them sequentially, and you'll be perfectly fine. And it'll do all the encryption for you, all the key exchanging, the authentication. You don't have to worry about all this stuff. You just pass it on, and when you get the message, pass it to CryptoBox open. And they have an equivalent one for secret key encryption where you both have the same key. It's called Crypto Secret Box.
Cool. Is that for end-to-end encryption, I guess?
Application layer. I would still use TLS for the actual server to client and server to server communication.
You wrote a PHP wrapper for it's a C library, right?
Yeah.
Are you saying Libsodium? I've been saying Libsodium. I've been saying it wrong this whole time.
I vote for Libsodium as well.
Tomato, tomato. I mean, it's a library, so I tend to say lib. I know a lot of people say lib. I don't think there's a preference there. If there is, I'm probably wrong. I've always had this habit of, and this goes all the way back to when I was in elementary school, I would read a word, I would look at it phonetically, like how the grammar rules are that I learned up until that point, and then I would try to pronounce it, and then everyone would always be like, what, are you stupid? It's pronounced this way.
Right, yeah. I'm the same way. Like, I was always afraid to actually read out loud because of that very thing. I'm just always, like, pronouncing things totally weird. Even when I'm reading the show notes or reading my notes for here on PHP Roundtable, I'll say something like the way I would never say it in real life. It's weird.
Yeah, it doesn't help that I have a really hard to pronounce last name, so...
Yeah, I was actually... Wait, hold on. I've never heard it pronounced before, but let me try it again. So it's Arciszewski.
It's actually Arciszewski.
Arciszewski. Man, I was way off.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
The way I always told people to remember it, like, I guess to say mnemonically, would be like art, scissors, zoo, and skiing. So Arciszewski.
Arciszewski.
Because I had such a hard to pronounce last name for most people when they look at it written down, whenever like a spelling thing came up and then I was like, oh, well, I guess I pronounced it wrong, people would just be like, well, it's okay, his last name's weird.
So just Scott.
Yeah.
Justin, it looks like you got chimed in there. You're officially hanging out.
I am officially hanging out. Hello, hello.
Hello. You're coming in very well. I can hear you very clearly.
I'm glad.
Are you? Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Victoria, Canada.
Oh, cool.
In BC.
Nice. Justin, we talked in the past about doing a episode about integrating PHP with other languages, and I've got that sort of like in the queue to put on the schedule, but I haven't gotten around to do that quite yet. Especially this past 2 months, actually, it's been really busy, and I'm been working on a project that I've been pushing out. But I guess you guys can all relate to that. When it gets closer and closer to the deadline, it's like more and more crunch time, and that's basically what I've been doing. Working with MIME types today. That was fun. So Justin, what were you doing today? Anything nerdy or fun?
No, I'm becoming more and more of a manager every day. Less code, more people. I'm just planning stuff for flying down to Santa Monica to do an on-site visit for a client. They're having me plan a big migration or big sort of revamp of their PHP application for doing better, obviously better performance, but also getting some application level monitoring in place. They do a lot of systems monitoring, making sure that like services are up and so on, but they don't look for how long transactions are taking and what's being used on the database and things like that. So we're getting basically just plugging New Relic into it and looking at what comes out. So
cool. New Relic, that's the analytics software, right? That you just integrate in your scripts and it just tells you exactly. It like sit there and monitor everything like line to line of code, right?
Yeah, for PHP, it actually installs in it as an extension. So it's, I would say, for production performance monitoring and sort of getting an idea of what's actually happening in production as opposed to what you think is happening in production. It's the best tool that I've found so far. You basically just install the extension. It acts as like an agent that then sends off information using statistical sampling of requests. So it doesn't execute it on every request, But for, say, 1 in every 1,000 requests or 1 every 10 seconds or so, it'll basically do a trace directly through every call in your application and tell you, here's what's taking a long time to execute. Here are the queries that you're doing and how long they're taking. Here are, like, the most valuable thing I've found for what they're doing is it's got it does analysis of your use of external services. So say if you're calling off to Amazon's API or you're calling off to some API somewhere, it'll time it, it'll watch for issues with that and report what's taken a long time, which for them is a big deal because they do a lot of message forwarding and so on. It's all SMS stuff. So
cool. I haven't actually messed with it, but I've run into it a couple times at conferences and then inheriting certain code bases that have it in there, but I haven't actually implemented it myself, so I've been looking to dive into it a little deeper a little bit later.
Yeah, it's for their light version's pretty good. It does sort of the basic stuff, but if you want to get the actual value out of it, you have to pay for their pro version, which is exorbitantly expensive.
I can imagine.
$200 a month per server. So
nice.
Yeah.
Which is gonna suck when you auto scale.
Yeah, that's a big thing. The client's like, is this going to start costing us like $50,000 a month once we decide to spin up servers? So we're just going to install it on a few and hope that that little slice of the infrastructure is enough to figure out what's going on.
Do you know how much performance hit just installing that costs?
I've not looked at it, but I've never noticed an issue. Back when I was running a project called SMS Cloud with Evan Corey, who some of you probably know, we had an issue where things were just suddenly not working because everything was going so slow, and so we just installed New Relic and paid for a month of their service, and we figured out it was it didn't actually cause any performance issue that I saw, and just having that insight into production let us figure out that one of the old developers on the project had done nested database queries. So they would query out a set of records, and then for every record, do another database query, and then another, and then another. So ended up with some requests doing like 1,000 database queries. So it was pretty helpful.
Dan, did you post something about you were working on something for PHP, like PHP 7.1 or something? Was that you? Or was that Levi?
That was Levi. I'm currently working on trying to get the final release of Imagic for PHP 7 out the door, which it would have been out the door a few hours ago, apart from the upstream ImageMagick library itself. It seems to have had a change that isn't supposed to be there.
So wait, did you? So you actually wrote the wrap? So ImageMagick is a C library?
ImageMagick is a C++ library that does graphics processing. The Imagick extension for PHP is a wrapper around that library that allows people to do.
Right, and you wrote the wrapper then, right?
I started maintaining it like 18 months ago or something like that.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
So I've just done the conversion for PHP 7 with lots and lots of if-defs in the code, so you can compile it against either PHP 5 or PHP 7. But yeah, just trying to get the final release of it out the door.
How has that been with that transition since it's I know a lot of things changed internally for PHP 7. From the extension point of view, how hard has it been to transition that?
Most of it's not been too difficult. The only bits that were really difficult was all of the for-each loops. Basically, in PHP internals, whenever you have an array or something that's going to be for-eaching over something, you usually have a hash table, and the implementation of that changed quite drastically from 5.6 to 7. So any of the functions in Imagick that touch a hash table are now duplicated, one version for PHP 5, one version for PHP 7, but pretty much the rest of the code is the same. And resources changed as well, which wasn't documented anywhere, which was the bit that made it hard.
It really depends what kind of extension you're working on. Like if you're just working on a wrapper, then like you said, you've just got to deal with like the hash table changes. But if you're working on stuff that actually affects send, it's quite a nightmare.
Yeah,
Like a
why would you ever
debugger?
do that?
Are you talking about the debugger that you're working on?
I'm talking about everything that I work on. They're all quite involved, and none of them are easy. And so, one of them might even be impossible. So
Which one's that?
UOps might not really be reasonable
UOps.
to keep doing it. Yeah, it's the thing for QA and testing.
It's my understanding is it allows you to replace the internal functions with user-undefined ones, which is pretty useful for testing. So you can mock the functions out. But yeah,
it's like a modernized version of like RunKit.
Has anybody offered to maintain it for you?
No.
Would you accept the offer if it was offered?
I would be amazed. I would accept the help. I mean, I've got to keep maintaining it. Well, I mean, I've got to make the decision this weekend whether I'm going to keep maintaining it or drop it and just refactor the code. I wrote it in the first instance to avoid refactoring the code because it was the way to keep moving forwards quickly. But it was always the case that we should have tried to refactor the code so that we didn't rely on it. So I've either got to do one or the other. So I've got to make the decision.
No pressure.
Yeah, I don't know. Either way, it's going to be months of work. I've been working on UOps for months and it still doesn't work properly, so it might just be best to cut my losses now, do something else.
How's PHP TBGDB
well, most of the work for that actually done by Bob. I didn't do most of that.
Oh, really?
For PHP.
Who's working on that? Who's working on that?
Oh, well, Bob done all the work for PHP 7, and like we still both work on it. But it's that was done quite early on. Actually, it was ready pretty quickly. Yeah.
That's Bob Finand. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yeah.
I think so. He's from Germany. He was on a couple episodes ago when we were talking about some PHP 7 stuff. Yeah, he's super involved. Like he's committing to PHP source all the time. He's got many of the commits.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if Anthony Ferrara is planning on chiming in here later, but he was the when I popped in the room 11 a couple hours ago and I was like, hey, we should figure out some topics to talk about. And I think, Joe, you were like, let's talk about kittens and things like that. So we should definitely talk about those. But somebody mentioned that we should talk about PSR 6. I don't know if that was you, Dan, or somebody else.
That was me.
Yeah.
That was a silly thing to say.
So
let's ask Justin about this first. Justin, are you up to speed with PSR 6?
Only heard bad things. Not up to speed on it. No, I wouldn't say I know anything about it worth saying. I guess the only thing I heard about it was that maybe there was some concerns about how well the interface covers the domain. That was about it.
Yeah, basically PSR 6 is all about caching, and I think it's one of those cases where there's no single set of interfaces that's going to make everybody happy. Some people have a really simple use case. They just need to be able to do get and set on a cache, and that's the whole complete use case. And you've got people at the completely other end of the scale where they need to be able to be setting multiple keys inside a single transaction, and they need to have stampede protection against too many people hitting the cache at once, and they need a much more complicated interface to be defined. I think it's just one of those things that it could just never be a good result, having a single thing come out and be the standard for. or PHP to be, or PHP Fig to be supporting.
So I have a question that might seem really obvious or possibly very dumb. Since a lot of people might only need the simple use case, why didn't they take the existing PSR6 interface, the one that has all these features that might not be necessary, and make it extend an existing interface that's just called, I don't know, simple cache interface?
If Anthony was here, he could give you a really good answer. I've read what he's written, so I'll attempt to try and summarize it. Basically, they're going about it in the wrong way. They're having just one interface, or possibly another interface, but each of these interfaces is a big thing by itself with multiple methods in it. What Anthony suggested, and other people have tried to suggest as well, is having segregated interfaces. So instead of having a complete cache, instead of having a cache be one interface defined, you'd have like a reading interface be defined, and all that would have inside it is a get method, and you'd have the writing part of the cache be separated out into a separate interface, and then for any implementation you could have it implement whichever interfaces would be appropriate. So they've gone for the monolithic interface definition. Anthony keeps suggesting segregated interfaces, which allow you to composite what you want to be defined. It's a different approach, and it's one that's a bit more flexible, but it doesn't produce a single interface for people to implement, which I guess is one of the reasons why they didn't go for it. But also, it would involve defining a lot more interfaces. So perhaps
I don't think there should be any interfaces. I think, like you said, you can't standardize that. There's so many varied caches, and for so many different reasons they're used. You can't say this is the interface for all caches. It just doesn't even make sense, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I think the other thing is, as well, is that wrapping interfaces. So wrapping third time is lucky. Wrapping implementations with your own custom interface is not that difficult a job. So say I want to use a doctrine cache and I want to wrap it in my own interface. I can just define a class that implements the interface and converts my calls to the doctrine cache calls. That's like the work of half an hour to define a class that wraps 10 methods, and that's not a huge amount of work. And you only need to do that once per project, and most of the time you'll be able to reuse that definition of your own cache across multiple projects. So the trade-off against not having to write that code for each project versus trying to force everything through a single shared interface doesn't seem to be a good trade-off to me.
I don't even think that you would share the interface between projects, because the kinds of requirements you need change with the project, and so the kind of interface you would need changes with the project. I mean, you probably could, but you'd be doing the same kind of thing that they've had to do to write a PSR.
My experience is that when you start a new project, you quite often just copy and paste the old project and start modifying it.
Oh, I don't.
But so yeah, if you copy and paste the project, you've got everything set up as it was on the old project, and if the requirements for how you want to cache stuff has changed, you just need to change it in the project's implementation.
Yeah, but even if you started it from scratch, I don't think it's standardized. It's not doesn't really make sense. But now it exists, it's probably going to be out there in the wild, and we're all going to be expected to.
I'm not so sure. It is definitely out in the wild, but when you've got, putting it bluntly, when you've got the people who are behind Doctrine saying that they're really not that happy with that cache, it's probably not going to be that well supported by Doctrine, at least for a little while.
It's only one project. It only takes 2 or 3 of the big projects to take it up, and then all the components that want to work with the major projects have got to do the same, and then all the components you want to use have got to do the same. So it doesn't really take very much. It would only take, say if just Symfony inside Laravel took it up, it would have enough traction to more or less be a requirement. Sadly. Hopefully they won't. Hopefully they'll stick to their guns, like Doctrine, and say it's not good enough. Do it again, or don't do it.
So it's officially passed through, right? Like it's.
I believe so. I haven't checked, but yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm interested. I would love to have Matthew Wiro Finney have, because he was the one who was the shepherd, if you will, of PSR7. I know it had a lot of back and forth, and it stayed in a pending state for so long.
I think that one's a different case actually, because, and again, this is something that's not quite the original aim of the PHP Fig group. To me, PSR7 is not really just an interface, it's an implementation by itself. And that's actually fine for PHP Fig to be defining implementations for those implementations to be used across different projects. Because some of the time you will have wildly different implementations, but for something like PSR7 where the HTTP request model is basically the same for all applications, it's having a single implementation is not that bad a thing. So yeah, I think it's, although that PSR was contentious as well, I think because it's got through and because it's good enough, the PSR7 implementation is good enough for most projects. Going forward, having just a single implementation as the standard won't be that big a problem. But I think that's quite a different case from the caching one, where there's definitely no single implementation that can be done for caching, and so it's going to be more divergent again, even after the PSR has passed.
Yeah, I was with Scott there on that question about, was there an idea of having a simple interface of like PSR6 simple and PSR7 or PSR6 complex or something, but I don't know. But like you guys are saying, it just seems like there's just such a different problem than any of the other PSRs have been playing, that it's kind of hard to. This one's been a tough one. It seems like I haven't followed it very closely, but it just seems like I don't know, from the very beginning it just seemed like it was going to be tough.
It seems like a really complex domain to try to enforce a standard on. Obviously, for something like HTTP, it's already got a standard and a way of doing it. The way of interacting with the HTTP client, yeah, there's lots of different ways, but the domain that is requests, or even for caching, the domain that is caching is so large and so hard to encapsulate. I almost feel like it's a mistake to try to tackle anything that substantial in a standard that's kind of almost enforced.
Yeah, I think it's not so much the attempt to do it once. It's attempting to make a standard that other people can use is not a bad thing. But then not having any plan to have separate standards which implement it in a different way. So yeah, so that people who want a simple thing can use a simple thing, and the people who want a more advanced thing can go off, and still within the PHP Fig's definition of what the caching interface should be. Still working in that group, have a different interface, but it's now almost forcing people to go away and completely do their own thing.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I'm sure probably everybody here uses PSR3 for their logger. I actually went a step beyond that and added my own log level called security error, which basically means it needs to be sent out to me immediately. It's not really a critical error like the data is like there's a huge problem, an emergency. It's kind of like a level of, hey, somebody's trying to actually hack me. I don't know if it's successful or not, but pay attention to this because this could be important.
That's a really cool idea. I like that. Of course, it would be security related with Scott.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I really like Justin's point that, like, PSR7 had standards to actually go off of. Like you already have all that figured out, and then all it is just putting an implementation or interface on top of that. Whereas caching, to my knowledge, I don't think there is any official standards out there for caching. I guess that was the whole point. They're kind of almost tackling two things at once, right? It's like figuring out a standard for caching and then having an interface for it. That's kind of like that's a big deal. Hey, Trevor and Levi both came in. What's up, guys?
What's up, man? Long time.
I haven't seen Trevor since like our after parties we used to do.
I know, it's been a while. It's been real long.
Have you've been kind of getting involved with PHP internals more, right? Like, or at least you were for a while, and I haven't
for a
seen what you've been
while.
up to.
I made a proposed change to the datetime library, and that did not work out.
What was it?
It was basically going from datetime immutable to datetime is such a pain. So the datetime immutable class has a way to like make a datetime from it, or other way around. So I just try to make it so it's easier to switch and just add a method. And it was talked about very briefly, and then it was just merged one day without any official process, really. Strange. And then
It's a victory.
And then like 2 weeks later, after I was like, yes, I'm a contributor, all of a sudden I forgot who it was, but they were just like, nah, dude, this didn't go through the process that we normally follow, so revert. And I was like, oh, okay, thanks.
So you almost had a moment of glory there.
I did. I was
almost got
hoping-
it through on grounds of being a bug fix, right?
Yeah. I was like, if I just do that and then a couple more docs stuff, then I'll be able to have a vote in RFCs. Didn't work out.
So you're going to try again for PHP 8? Because I mean, there's one or two things that could be tidied up with the datetime stuff for PHP 8.
Sure.
Sure. Okay, cool. That's agreed. You'll do it.
I think it looks like Chris Hartjes is trying to take a picture of us on Google Hangouts. Oh, we can't hear you. I think you might have a mic issue there. Oh, while Chris is working that out, Levi, you had said you were working on enums, right, for PHP 7.1? Is that still a thing?
Sort of. So I have not a lot of time anymore to work on stuff. My kids take up a lot more time than they used to as they get older. So
Oh, interesting.
I've committed to polishing up the enum RFC, and Bob Boynand is going to be implementing it properly. I have a proof of concept patch which shows that, hey, this is really not that difficult, but I want him to do it the difficult way so that it's not an object, basically. I think it will probably happen for 7.1, but some of the other RFCs I was working on, like union types, nullable types, probably not. Just because of time, not because of anything else.
So a couple of HHVM features to be ported over.
So as time goes on, I'm just like, do we really need this feature? Like, their enums are essentially just constants that are typed to like string or something. They're not really like strongly typed. Like there's no like type guarantees that the thing you gave it was that type. It just implicitly converts, which, like, I'm not sure why they did that. Like, they have static type checkers and, like, don't allow ints to string conversions to happen implicitly, but I don't know, it just seems really weird. So we will not do enums like Hack does. So, yeah.
Well, it'd be interesting. I know I always say HHVM when I really mean Hack, and then I say Hack when I really mean HHVM. But it's interesting that HHVM being the runtime, and then it's able to support PHP 7 or PHP 5 or whatever PHP flavor, and then Hack, Facebook's flavor, and it's interesting. Like it just blows my mind how it's able to support. Say, like, for example, you're saying it's not like strictly typed enums or whatever. If that was implemented in the PHP as a strictly typed enum, how the runtime is able to support both of those features is just, I'm not there yet as a programmer. It still blows my mind. I don't know, magic. That's
yeah,
what it is
it's
for me right now.
got to be painful to them. Like when they announced that they were going to support PHP 7 and PHP 5 in the same code base, and you just do a setting, I was like, wow. I mean, like, that's great and that's crazy. Props to you guys for for doing that. But wow, that's got to be hard.
And they recently, I mean, they were right in line with PHP 7 release. Like, I think it was like the day after. They were like, here's the next version of HHVM, and it supports PHP 7 features. I mean, they were like cranking on it hard. Like, I had pull requests into HHVM for the C-string functions for PHP 7, and I hadn't finished it, and like I still had to add some tests and some other things, and like literally like a few days before PHP 7 launched, they're like, okay, I'm going to take over and we'll get this through, and they were doing that with all these and closing out all these pull requests, and it was just they had I don't even think they probably slept. They were just probably going hardcore.
Hey, did they ever merge in the GetRandom2 support?
What was it? The GetRandom2? Oh, did they? No. So HHVM is the C-strings are implemented a little differently. In PHP 7, the random bytes come from basically dev/urandom, but like Scott can elaborate more on that because we actually Scott went in there and made some changes to change out some of the sources and stuff depending on the system. But in HHVM, it's written in C++, and there's a library called Folly, which is basically Boost, Facebook's version of Boost. So if you're familiar with C++, there's a library called Boost. Or I'm not a C guy, so I'm probably saying all the wrong things. But basically, it's another Facebook flavor library, and it is what they're using for generating random bytes. And it's basically just using dev/urandom, and it doesn't fail very well. If your OS is screwed up, it will fail close still, but it won't do it gracefully like it does in PHP 7.
Oof. That's oof.
So there's improvement. So a pull request from Scott is coming down the pipe.
Most likely.
But you'll be sending the pull request to Folly, not HHVM. So like we got to figure out a way. Right now, what happens is Folly it uses Google log or something, and so it like if there's an error, it just poops it out to glog, and glog's like, oh, seg fault or whatever, and then so it needs to be able to like handle like when it errors out, and I don't have the experience or the time to do that. So Scott, it's on you. It's on your shoulders. You got to figure it out.
I did see when you made that pull request and it was finally going through, because I was curious like how you implemented it, and I saw it was essentially delegating to the library.
Yeah, totally.
And it looked like it was like a Facebook thing, an internal C++ thing.
Yeah, the original pull request I had was Jeremy McCullough helped me with, and we got it all like pulling from dev/urandom, and we had, like and everything. But they were like, hey, there's already a C-string over here, and we're like, oh, we'll just use that then.
Yeah, it's probably better for them to have a consistent source, but
yeah, for all other stuff. Yeah, for sure.
That way they can fix it once.
For sure. Chris, did you fix your microphone?
You tell me.
Yay! We can hear him. Welcome. We've been talking about Hack, but you actually wrote the book on Hack, didn't you?
Well, I wrote a book on Hack because I thought there was value in showing people how, if they had like a really crufty old legacy code base, there was some stuff I thought you could cherry pick from Hack just to make maintaining it easier. A lot of the scalar type hints, and just some of the array stuff that made APIs. But in a lot of ways, I feel like all the pressure that HHVM and Hack put on, I guess, what do you want to call it, CPHP, most of the stuff that I thought was developers should know, except for like the more consistent interfaces for map and reduce and stuff, it's all in PHP 7. So in many ways I'm like, well, I wrote a book and hopefully some people got something out of it, but the main message of it, it's almost literally not needed anymore because those features are in 7. I mean, I know that probably the array map and array reduce and those things are never going to change, but it's nice to see that a language that has no pressure on it to change stagnates in ridiculous ways, and it's just kind of nice to see pressure from an unlikely source caused what's often a very fractious group to come together and say, all right, I guess we better do a few of these things.
But still buy your book.
Well, I mean, buy that book, that would be great. Buy my other books, that's great. I'm writing a new book. I hope you all buy that when that comes out in March. So, keep funding my expensive Magic the Gathering habit and helping me make payments on my car.
I'm curious if you've ever gone up against my my choreographer. He's super huge into Magic, and he's got this program on his computer that he's just like every time we go to his house all the time to get choreo, and he works with us and stuff. But like he's like anytime he takes a break, he's in there doing Magic. I'm sure you guys have probably gone head to head at one point.
I have no idea. I don't really play online much. Like I got roughly last year at this time I went to a humongous tournament that was in New Jersey. So I like piled in a car and drove down with a bunch of guys who were young enough to be my kids, and so I got to be the Magic dad and look after them all. And so I went and played, and it was like the most horrible playing experience of my life. I had felt I was like all prepared, and was expecting not to win this huge 4,000 person tournament, but at least do okay. And I just got wiped off the face of the earth by people. And in the aftermath of that, I kind of had to make a decision about what was it that I wanted out of this particular hobby. And in the end, the decision was you'll never be able to devote enough time to get really, really good at it. And I didn't have any kind of innate skill that enabled me to just pick up a bunch of cards and make it all work. So I had to almost come to an inner peace and say, all right, well, I'm going to be a casual competitive type, because I am quite competitive at games, and that sort of decision made me feel a lot more mellow and zen about what is a ridiculous hobby to have, and the game is a very complex one. Like I tell people, it's like imagine chess, but every 3 months they create new pieces, and that's kind of what Magic the Gathering is like. So, so as part of that whole thing was a commitment that I was really only going to play against people when I could sit in front of them and actually see them and talk to them. So I really don't play online at all anymore. Just the odd time I'll do it, but for the most part, I'm I started doing this as a way to try and help with poor short-term memory and pattern recognition, and in the end, it turned out to be the thing that I really liked was the social aspect. So, every Friday when I do happen to be home, because I'm down in Orlando right now, and when I am home, I go to my local gaming store and I hang out with a bunch of people who are all super young, and some of them are only a year or two older than my oldest daughter, who's 16. And I try to enjoy myself rather than look at it in terms of I have to crush all my opposition.
It's nice to have a really, really expensive hobby like that, though. Something to filter all your just funnel all your money into.
Yeah, no, my wife doesn't like that analogy, so I wouldn't say that.
Well, I definitely have that with dance for sure, so I can relate. Not quite the mental dexterity that you need with dance, but a lot of motor skills. Speaking
Magic is one of those few.
Oh yes.
Oh, I was just gonna say
yeah, wait, 1, 2, 3, go. Just kidding.
Yeah. Magic is one of these games where I won't lie, having money helps smooth out some of the rough patches when you're trying to put decks together to play against people. But in the end, all that money is not going to help you if you don't have skill at the game, and also if you don't have the right attitude where every time you get your teeth kicked in, it's an opportunity to learn about what went wrong and create new mental models of how to play the game. And the idea is just to keep incrementally getting better. And so with that big change in attitude, I enjoy myself way more and find myself less likely to want to reach across the table and swat the guy because he's acting like a jackass. So, and as a very physically large person, it's very easy to use that intimidation side of things. I try to be very non-threatening to people when I play.
Well, you're very non-threatening in person too. You market yourself as the grumpy programmer, but you're a very friendly person in my book. You're like the big huggable bear.
Oh, now you're wrecking my whole brand. Don't do that, Sammy.
No, wait. I mean, you're angry and mean, and I don't want to see you again. No, you're super friendly in person. I mean, I know we've talked about that in the past, but like, yeah. I think people can I guess get intimidated by like the brand and stuff, but especially if you're listening, you've never gone to one of these conferences, and you're kind of used to like kind of doing your own thing and stuff. I highly recommend going to them. Like, I know it's really hard to kind of get over that hump of like, okay, I'm going to do this, it's going to be awkward, but like, there's so many people, all of us are awkward, so like, just come out and hang out with us because we're all awkward. Actually, I'm not speaking of awkward, but like Nikki is in here, Nikita, he's like, what's going on in this hangout thing? And I'm like, come on and join. And I'm like, come on, Nikki, get in here. So let's see if we can convince Nikita to come in here and hang out with us. We should all just like hang out. What do you call it? Mention him in the room and make his notifications blow up. It'll be like a cult. Ah, Trevor beat me to it.
The minute you were saying that, I was like, I'm gonna do it.
So we talked about PSR6, we talked about security Libsodium, or Libsodium, as Scott likes to affectionately call it, and why RSA is no bueno. And let's see what else. We haven't really talked much about PHP 7. That came out. That's a thing. Oh yeah, this is the first PHP roundtable since PHP 7 actually came out. I mean, I know we've talked here and there about PHP 7, but like, I mean, is everybody enjoying it? Like, what happened there? Like,
It's like the first major version in what, a decade?
Yeah, it's a long
crazy.
time.
Everyone here has like been using it in production for a while now, right?
Right.
It's like I'm already using master branch again. What is this 7 release?
No.
Yes.
Dangerous.
Actually, for the Ubuntu, all my servers are Ubuntu, so the PPA for PHP 7 came out pretty much like the day after, and I was super excited, so I started installing everything. But not all of the libraries were compiled, so like Xdebug wasn't in there and all that stuff, and so I was sans Xdebug on my development stuff for a little bit. But yeah, so if you're on Ubuntu, everything should be ready to rock on PHP 7. Have you guys run into any issues with like people not upgrading because they're like, I'll wait till like all the bugs are worked out?
Yeah, everybody's saying.
Yeah.
Like, I expect that. Like, in all seriousness, I don't use PHP 7 in production. I probably won't use it in production until at least 7.0.2 or 3 if we're feeling adventurous, but maybe not even until 7.1.
Yeah.
On my personal stuff, like, I do work off of Bleeding Edge Master, but no, at work we're the wait for stable and major problems to be found because we're too small of a team to want to deal with encountering those ourselves.
For me, it's extremely strange because a brand new version of PHP comes out and it's all kind of cutting edge new features. And like for the job that I get my paycheck for, I never get to touch PHP anymore. It's all Python and other stuff too. So the way I get to stay in touch with PHP is through the OpenCFP stuff. And as soon as Travis had that available, I did update it, and all our tests are really crummy, low 65% code coverage tests. They all pass. So at least OpenCFP is relatively, as far as I can tell, PHP 7 compatible. It just seems kind of ironic that a super long career in doing dev work with PHP, and now that a really kind of a leap forward almost as much as 4 to 5, and like, yeah, no, I only have to work and stuff with PHP because I want to, not because I have to.
Well, I feel like that it's a community that everybody just goes away for a little bit and then comes back, or they're always kind of got one foot in, like it's just so many people who like are so involved in other communities, but they're always kind of a little bit in PHP.
Well, look at poor old Phil Sturgeon, right? Can't get away.
Oh yeah.
But on the other hand, working with Python's not so bad. You just got type hints in Python 3.5, so that's good.
Oh, is that a new thing?
You foolishly assume Mozilla lets us use Python 3.
Oh my goodness, you're one of those poor souls. Actually, for my job today, I installed Python 2.7.11, their latest security release. And I was just reflecting on, it's very possible that in 5 years to the day, I could be installing another Python 2.7 security release. Like, it just won't die. Like, they keep extending the support for Python 2.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. I think that
I think Mr. Grumpy is frozen.
And I don't even know if it's PHP 3. I mean, it might be. It might work with it. I have no idea. I should probably investigate that. But I just have PHP 2.7 whatever homebrew gives me. But the Mozilla thing is very weird. Everything that we do here is completely out in the open. So like all the projects I work on, the source code for the most part is available. The tools that I get to create to do stuff, those are all, we're supposed to put those up on GitHub and make them available to other folks. So it's working in the open is a very, very different feeling from most of the places I've been.
I'm really getting addicted to the open source kind of feel, though. Like, working open like that, it's just, when I have to do closed source stuff, it feels icky almost now that I do it. It's just like, I really enjoy having the whole, like, or at least a small community of people who are really excited about this specific project I'm working on, like, all kind of nerding out on it, and then, like, people using it, and I don't know, there's something about it that's just really special. I don't know if that's gonna. Go ahead.
Overall code quality is better when you have to work in the open, because you're like, somebody might actually see this code that I just wrote. I should probably clean it up a little bit.
Absolutely.
Inspired by fear and embarrassment.
I started doing code reviews with my web developers, like, not very often, but every once in a while, and I'm just, like, ashamed. I'm like, what have you guys... Who said this was okay, Like, I guess technically I did by not having code reviews more frequently, but...
Yeah, I've yet to do like an actual pair programming with somebody, and I've been wanting to do that for a long time. So maybe one of these days, are we going to be? Oh, I guess you could technically say I've pair program, like with the last thing I did with Jeremy McCullough when we were working on the HHVM port. Yeah. So I guess I have done it. It's never been like an official. Okay, we're going to sit down and pair program. It's been more and more informal and like, hey, can you look at this for me real quick? So.
Well, I think that's how it works most often, though. Like, my company, I'll be having an issue, and I'll just be like, hey, Brian, come over and check this out. It's the CTO. And so we'll just kind of sit there and look at something and, like, logically go through it, and we'll figure out a solution together. And, he'll look over my shoulder, I'm looking over his shoulder, and kind of figure out, like, oops, that's dumb, You can go quick, but at the same time, it's a different experience. Very good.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just when it's so informal, it just doesn't feel like it has a label or whatever.
Yeah, I've never actually formally done pair programming. I think the closest I've come is when I'm working with Diffuse on his encryption library. I'll send like a pull request, and then like a week later, he'll come back with comments in line like, you should probably do this instead. This looks dangerous. This doesn't actually fix the problem. WTF are you doing?
I found pair programming to be the most useful when I don't know what I'm doing necessarily, working with something unfamiliar. Evan Corey and I, for the client I'm working with, at one point we were learning Ansible together and learning like systems administration stuff and all sorts of Java stuff. And we just spent hours and hours and hours just on a hangout just trading barbs over how we're doing things wrong and iteratively figuring it out. It's pretty helpful there.
Yeah, like especially, I guess you could technically call open sourcing, like when you open source and you have people comment on your code, that's kind of like a pair programming, or at least a code review. And I love that because when I'm working on the Facebook PHP SDK there's another guy in France, Yassine, who's always like, just like immediately as soon as I push something up, he's just like commenting all over and telling me like every time he thinks of a better way of doing something. I'm like, man, this is amazing. Like this is awesome. I wish I could do this with everything, but
yeah, open source is like massive multiplayer programming.
Yeah, multiplayer programming. That's a great way of saying it.
Right. It's great though. It's a really cool kind of aspect of our industry now that everything can be so open.
Yeah.
Earlier
quick
you were
question.
saying. Oh, go ahead.
A quick question for people who do code reviews. How do you separate out useful technical, this is definitely wrong issues from just stylistic issues where doing it one way would work and doing it another style would work? But when you've got the reviewer who's making more style comments than actual technical issue comments, how do you separate those?
Well, we set style standards first.
I meant more an approach to a problem rather than code thing.
I guess it's unavoidable, really, because to some people, what style might be, the line's blurred between the two, and it might not always be obvious.
There's definitely a blurred line, but there's definitely some reviews that people do are just you're not checking that this is not null, and that's definitely a technical issue with code. And other ones are where I'd separate out in separate function.
They're like one of the hardest parts of my job, as far as I'm concerned, because it's all about trying to get, to a good solution, whatever you consider is good, with multiple people, and trying to approach something kind of politically. You have to make sure you're careful about the words you choose and the language and just the overall kind of emotion you put into things. And you want to make sure you're not just commenting on stuff just because you feel like, oh, this should be changed because my ego says this. But yeah, going between something like this, if you have like a more factual statement, like, okay, this is O of n, this is O of n squared, so here this might be faster. Even then, you want to choose language that's just going to be rude or just going to be mean for no reason, right? It's almost like,
you idiot, why did you choose the log square?
Right, how dare you? It's more of like a suggestion, but a strong suggestion. And then when it comes to like stylistic stuff, or even just approach, like, hey, you used a for each, and I would use an array map, whatever. That's just kind of like, oh, you know what, this is what we've done maybe in other places. This would be maybe more consistent. If you don't have a great way of backing it up, maybe you're wrong. It's so subjective though.
That feels also just like a matter of building a rapport with your coworkers. Obviously, in an open source thing, it's slightly different because you get a lot of one-off things where you have to review. But anyone you're working with regularly, as long as you build a rapport and they know that when you're criticizing their implementation, as opposed to it just being buggy or something, as long as they know that it's not personal or you're not being catty, you just think that it would benefit from a change. I think that having that rapport is certainly very important.
I think it's also helpful to actually point out specific things they did well. I think most of the time code reviews are like, okay, what's wrong here, rather than, oh, that was good, et cetera, et cetera. I think, especially if you've been criticizing a lot for a few minutes or something, take a break and step back and make sure that you point out something that was good or correct, and I think it helps. I think like trying to understand what they're doing and making sure they understand that you're trying to understand is a really good first step, because whether it's a stylistic change or a technical issue, they need to trust you. So like, in my code reviews, I don't. What I do is I find something and say, oh, let's dig into this. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And it's just completely open. Why not? Why did you choose this poor method? It's why. What are you doing at all here? Explain to me. Tell me what's going on. and they try and walk me through. And often I found some of the bad decisions are because they copied a bad decision that someone else made some other place in the code, and they were just repeating it, you know. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, wrapping a criticism in a question is certainly a good way to blunt it a bit, so that they don't feel that you're attacking what they did. You're just trying to figure out why they did it that way.
Like, what is this block of code supposed to accomplish? And help me understand, you know?
Yeah, I have a similar anecdote that goes along that line, and you're definitely
Hey, Scott.
right.
Scott, sorry to interrupt. Can you turn up your volume a little bit on your mic? You're like coming in really soft.
How's that?
That's a little bit better, yeah.
Okay. So, you know, as you guys know, I do code reviews, that kind of thing, crypto audits. One of the things I've tried to do is whenever I find like an actual like really bad design decision, like using string repeat as a random number generator, instead of just having a report which basically is, hey, here's a vulnerability in your application, you know, people can predict your password reset tokens, I also include like negative findings, like we didn't find any SQL injections, we didn't find any cross-site request forgeries, we didn't find any of these other OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. Just so that way it isn't like all negative, all bad news. The person who's reading the audit report will say, hey, you know, these are the things that they didn't find. And then anybody who comes in afterwards, if they look at the previous audit reports, will say, hey, these were things that were not found. We can either prioritize them as something that maybe they missed, or we can say, hey, these people are competent. Let's actually look at it, things that they didn't already cover, so that way they're not duplicating effort and wasting a lot of time and energy.
I'm glad you chimed in, Scott, because I had a thought on. Colt, I'm going to mute you. Sorry, there's an echo. Oh, you got it. So interesting thing. The C Springs functions in PHP 7 really started with Scott, and it started with a code review that he did on the Facebook PHP SDK, and he had converted the really crappy way that we were generating a CSRF token into something that was cryptographically secure. And at the time, like, I didn't know anything about cryptographically secure bytes or anything like that, and I was just like, why are you like? I was politely, he sent a PR to change it, make it more secure. And I was like, this is a lot more involved and potentially buggy than what we had. Like, we had a one-liner, and now it's like, a whole other function and stuff. I was like, I'm not really sure why we need this. Like, thanks for the PR, but like, thanks but no thanks. And Fosco at Facebook was like, oh, like he's been really awesome about letting the community like kind of really take over the SDK, and so he was just kind of like, taking my influence and like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll just close this out. And so, but Scott, he wasn't gonna let that stand. So he goes on, he's like on Twitter, he's like, these guys over here just took my cryptographically secure PR and said we don't need this, turn this one-liner into blah. I was like, oh, okay, wait, hold on, maybe we need to look at this again. So like, I asked him, I was like, so what's the evidence behind it? Like, why'd you change this up? And he's I think he posted a video to like this YouTube video of this guy showing like how he could bust the PHP sessions, like predict the like the basically the non-cryptographically secure way that session IDs were generated, and like forge IDs for like Facebook and hack into people's accounts and stuff like that. And so it like really opened my eyes, and I was like, oh my goodness. And the way that you approached it wasn't like, oh, guys, like this could be better. It was like, hey, you guys, like it was a little bit more harsh. And I feel like from the infosec world, we get a lot of that. Like, people are always asking, like, why are infosec people so mean? And like, to some degree, yeah, like there are some like genuinely just they seem like jerks all the time. But like sometimes I feel like they have to shout, a little bit sometimes to kind of like get people's attention. And if you're willing to listen, then you can probably learn from it. But some people like kind of get nut, they'll like get like a nut and like get really hard and like, I'm not gonna listen to you because you're shouting at me. So like I'm curious, like I mean in this particular case, what Scott did, I feel like it's I mean, this is why the C Spring functions are in PHP 7 is because of that shouting that Scott was doing. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Like, what from the infosec world, like, do you guys feel like infosec people are really mean, and do they have sort of a more like a, maybe they need to be a little bit mean to kind of like get people's into thinking more securely?
I mean,
I'm waiting for somebody else to go.
So yeah, security's hard, right? Because it's just so easy to just kind of think, oh, this is good enough, and move along. And security is a moving target. I mean, I'm sure Scott could put this a lot better. Yeah, security is a moving target. The minute you think, oh, I've secured this thing, it's always that weakest chain in the link, or weakest link in the chain. So it's like you're always just kind of covering holes. And hopefully, though, your approach to it is a bit better than just putting a sheet over the hole. But what's cool is, that persistence was good, but it took both sides. It took Scott to be persistent, and it took you, Sammy, to be like, okay, maybe this is something I have to really look at. But the end kind of benefit is some of this copy pasta, Stack Overflow, awful stuff that you see that unfortunately gives a lot of PHP the bad rap that it gets. That's going to be changed from this point forward. That legacy is always going to exist. But the fact now that there are such obvious functions in PHP called random bytes or random int that are like cryptographically secure, and that their internal implementations can change easily to stay secure, that's huge. They're so easy to use. It's just there's no excuse anymore. So I mean, it's great now that generating a password or generating just some bytes, generating a random int is not going to be something that's going to require some other library where you're going to have to tell somebody, okay, well, I know you're just trying to write this simple thing, but now here's what Composer is, here's how you install the dependency, here's how you try to keep that thing updated. Now it's built into the runtime. It's easy. Between that stuff and like the password hashing built in, PHP kind of got bullied into being secure, very bullied into it, and a lot of that is our fault. But now it's surprisingly, at least from some parts of the surface, a very, very secure language, and a lot more secure than others, because it's had to become that at a defense. I just found it fascinating.
Yeah, it's security is always hard. I've had a foot in both worlds, both in infosec and development, and now a lot more management. And I can understand why yelling is often necessary. Security, in many ways, in the ways it matters, is such an esoteric sort of domain. Trying to understand why these things happen and how they matter is hard on its own, and it gets worse when you're trying to take it from, like, we can all understand when, say, Scott explains something. We know enough of the terms to get the gist of why this matters. But trying to turn around and not fully understand it and have to turn around and try to justify the time to your own management, to the people who sign your own paychecks, that's often one of the hardest things, trying to basically justify why you should be spending time on secure cryptographic hashing and so on. It doesn't, you can't, after you've done the work, even point back at it and say, see, now our hashing function takes this many more billion years to crack, sort of thing. It doesn't make sense to management. So the yelling, I think, is often necessary in the sense that it demonstrates that, assuming the people respect you who are listening to you, it demonstrates that this is something that you as an expert are passionate enough about to yell about it, to go beyond just sort of stating the facts and go to advocate for it. I think that it's unfortunate that it's necessary, but I do think it's necessary, being openly passionate about issues that you know exist.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to leave. It was nice to see you guys. It's just a brief little visit for me here, but I should join on these more regularly.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Levi. It was good to see you. And your avatar is talking to me. It's the cute little kitty. So
That's so cool, by the way. I could watch that. Right.
I need to get one that's like slightly animated, so he just tilts his head back and forth or something.
I was thinking that it would be really good if the mouth moved. Well, surely we can make that happen.
All right, see you guys later.
All right, see you. So, Dan, I see you've been in the chat room. You're pushing something. I guess you're making mods to ImageMagick, and as you're joining us in the roundtable, you're actually having some issues here. What's going on? Your Travis build is failing.
My Travis build is failing, and it's
Oh,
not
no.
failing. It's not failing locally. Short version, as the ImageMagick library made a change to the library code a few days ago. I can't reproduce an issue locally. Can't reproduce it in an Ubuntu box, but the Travis builds fail continually. So I'm going to have to ask the Travis support guys to be very nice to me and let me log into the box and see what's going on there, hopefully.
But the logs aren't showing you anything, right? Like they're not showing you
That
anything
is
useful.
correct. I have installed Valgrind on Travis, and it's saying that the code is crashing, but it's not giving me any more information than that.
So the command valgrind PHP exited with 139. So valgrind, what is valgrind?
It's a program.
It's
You go
a
to,
memory error detection tool.
but it also does a few more things as well.
It's got other tools. Yeah, it's got other tools into it.
Normally, when I've got a program that's crashing and giving segfault, I run it through Valgrind, and it will give me the stack trace of what code is causing the error. So that gives you the exact line in the C code, and it's not doing anything this time. It's just saying.
That does look really weird.
Yes. And as I said, I've got it on a Ubuntu box locally, and the code works absolutely fine. So it's at this point that it's time to just stop trying to guess what's happening and just actually ask for some help from the Travis support people.
So you've got the same version of ImageMagick on your machine,
Yeah.
and
That's really no. Yeah, then I do have the same version. Yeah.
So you've tried disabling debug. Have you tried disabling debug? Because the Travis build doesn't use debug, see?
Is that a C flag, or would that just be on the command line?
The configure flag enable debug, which shows memory leaks and stuff. That's not enabled on Travis.
Okay, cool.
So that could be the difference. But that is a really weird output from Valgrind.
Yep.
Just nothing.
My dance partner has arrived.
Hi.
She drives from work so she works out in the burbs, and in Chicago traffic is amazing, and by amazing,
it just took 2 hours to get here.
So and she doesn't live that far away. Like it's like a couple of miles in traffic in Chicago in rush hour. It's just it's like LA traffic. So
Joe, how long does it take you to get to work?
From
Joe.
here, like an hour. So.
Yes. Well,
What?
Are you going to join us for the conversation? We're trying to help us debug this situation. So the ImageMagick extension is not the build is failing on Travis CI, but it's not failing on Dan's local machine. So what is the answer, Heather?
It's a great way to stay in shape.
It's a great way to stay in shape. Did you guys try that yet?
That's great.
Yeah, Heather actually has been trying to learn some PHP, so we've been having some PHP conversation. And when I asked her what kind of material you're reading for learning PHP, and she showed me, and it was PSR 0, then PSR 1, PSR 2, no PSR 2, PSR 3. I'm like, I don't think this is a good place to start for learning PHP. Let me give you something else. So she's
It's
got some other
impressive that she somehow ended up reading the spec stuff. That's pretty good.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was the entry point, but I think for me, do you guys ever remember DevShed? I know it's still around, but like, were you guys ever active on DevShed.com, DevShed forums? Nobody was in there.
I remember the site, but never. Like most forums, I treated it as read only.
Oh, you never got involved there?
More to like preserve my own sanity.
Yeah.
Because I kind of treat most forum and discussion sites that way, Reddit and other places, just as read only, because rule number one of surviving 18 years as a programmer is to never read other people's comments.
Yeah.
Because it just leads to sadness and
angriness on my part. So I learned to just say, yeah, that's great. I'm not going to read the comments. I mean, these days because I do get the odd person who I guess screws up enough courage to ask me a question on Twitter about like resources for PHP. I almost always direct them to phptherightway.com, and I say that's basically I think that's the best starting point. I mean, you start there, and there's links to everything, and you can run away screaming when you see all the things you have to figure out, or you can, there are some links to some tutorials. I tell people there's a lot of good free online courses that people can take, but pretty much consistently I tell people PHP the right way is where you want to, is for a beginner where I would point them to.
That's a good idea. Yeah, PHP the right way is a great resource for that. I know there's a couple of hey Heather, what are you using to learn PHP? You were going that site. What was the site called? You remember?
Not PHP, HTML.
Oh yeah, she's starting with HTML and CSS. Never mind. There's other resources for that, but yeah, there was a couple. She did some PHP, but not a lot yet. But she'll get there.
No, you're just teaching me the nerd lingo.
Oh, the nerd lingo. She just likes hanging out with everybody. That's the cool thing. Is she's like, because Phil Sturgeon and Jeremy McCullough and Daniel Casanao, I'm not saying his name right, but like for WorksCon, they all came to Chicago and we were all hanging out. And Heather's like, oh, I love your friends. Your nerd friends are so fun. And I'm like, yeah, you should learn PHP with us. That'd be fun. You could talk nerd with us. And
PHP
so she's,
community, that's for sure.
What's that? Was that Chris? Oh, he's muted now. He's like, that one wasn't supposed to be heard.
He's just like, never mind. Never happened.
JK. Well, okay, so it is like, I think we've been talking for like an hour and a half, in fact. So, do you guys have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Kittens. No.
Kittens. Oh yeah, we never talked about kittens.
Well, we did a little bit.
When? Oh yeah, that's right. When we were talking about Levi's avatar. Do you have any other thoughts on kittens?
I gotta say, I love randomly. Sometimes it'll be late at night. Sometimes it'll be while I'm like about to leave. But I love seeing these tweets every once in a while. Like, oh hey, by the way, everybody join the open chat. I always love it. So keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I love the open chat too. Love talking with you guys and learning from you guys. What else can you teach me?
Don't use PSR6.
Oh.
Shots fired.
Oops. Oops, I'm going to mute myself now.
Cool. Well, if you guys don't have any other thoughts, typically I wrap these things up with a developer shout-out, but I have 2 other episodes slated for this month that I haven't scheduled out because I've been really busy on another project. So eventually, hopefully, if I can get them scheduled before this month ends, we'll do developer shout-outs there. But if not, January is going to be full of PHP roundtables because they're going to have to do 4 episodes to because Jeremy, not Jeremy, help me out here, Laracast's Jeremy.
Jeffrey.
Oh my gosh. Jeffrey, thank you. Oh my gosh, I had a little bit to drink before doing this. Jeffrey Way on Laracast has been consistently sponsoring PHP Roundtable for the developer shoutout and sends $100 every month so that we can send $50 gift cards for every 2 episodes a month. And it forces me to have 2 episodes a month, which is great. But it means I have to have 2 episodes a month. So I really appreciate that we are able to kind of like through a kind of a team, we're able to kind of honor people in the developer community who don't necessarily get a shout out. So, but that will be happening. Hopefully, maybe 2 more in December and then 2 more in January. But we'll see how it works out. But thanks, guys, for joining and popping in from Room 11. And you guys have any final words before we close this thing out?
Good night.
That's a good.
My only final words is that people ought to start. The sooner people start upgrading to 7 and start finding all the bugs, that's the sooner we can get the more stable versions out the door. There's not been that many issues, but yeah, the sooner people upgrade, the better. Or try to upgrade.
Yeah, what he said.
My final words are buy my books.
Nice. And Scott's final words are?
He's muted.
My final words are PHP 7 rocks, 7.1 should be better, and just use Libsodium. You'll be a lot happier.
Very nice. Cool. And Heather, you got any final words before we wrap this up? Peace.
Peace.
All right, guys.
Peace
That's
out.
how I like to end it, too. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, see you guys later.
Bye.